Welcome everyone to Choice Conversations, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your life, one choice at a time. I'm your host, Chris Stefanik. Let's do this. Hey gang, today I'm bringing you an interview I have with Chris Lewis. Chris, he's a blogger from the Dad of Divas blog. He's a podcaster. He does Dad Spotlight. And as you may have guessed, we talk about parenting in this show. So we're going to get into his philosophy for parenting, what his experience has been like as a dad, what he's learned doing his own podcast, having his own blog, and the like. So check it out. I think you'll like it. If you're not aware, Choice Conversations has bonus content available on patreon.com. So if you'd like to get some bonus content, patreon.com/choiceconversations. There's a link in the show notes. All right, here's the interview. Chris, hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh yeah, no, it is my pleasure. I'm so glad to have you here. Now, for my listeners who aren't familiar with your work, could you maybe take a few minutes to talk about who you are and your journey to how you got to this point?
Yeah, sure. I am a father of two, and I have a 12-and-a-half and a 9-year-old, live just outside of Lansing, Michigan. And on a daily basis, professionally, I work in higher education, been working in higher education, student affairs work for about 20 years. And for the past 10 years, I've been blogging at a blog called Dad of Divas. I've been talking about fatherhood, helping dads be better dads, talking about raising daughters, because I have 2 daughters myself. And then for the last 2 years, my co-host and I, and unfortunately my co-host wasn't able to be here, we have a podcast called Dad Spotlight, which is a podcast, again, all about helping dads be better dads. And we have about 117 episodes available for people. And it's a great opportunity to be able to just to outreach and help dads, because what we've come to find is that the more that we try to be good dads, the more we find that we need to learn. We talk about professional development or personal growth. Being a father is probably one of the biggest areas where you have to have personal growth, because there's no manual when that baby is born, and you have to learn along the way for the most part. And there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to fall on your face, but you definitely have to do what you can to be able to learn, to grow, to develop. And that's what the show is all about as well.
Right. Yeah. You talk about there's no manual. I tell you, so much advice that I was given was just wrong or bad, and I remember being given a book. Oh geez. I'm drawing a blank right now. I was given a book while my wife was pregnant. And it was like the advice was worse than not getting anything, because the advice was so bad, And I'm totally spacing what the name of that book is right now, but at any rate, yeah, I know what you mean. It is a big learning process, and there's nothing that challenges you more than parenting. Now, it's one thing to be faced with the challenge of parenting. I too have a daughter. And it's another then to go out and start a podcast about it. So what was the deciding factor to start a podcast? And I guess, how did you meet your co-host, Don Jackson, and get all that going?
Sure. The podcast itself was something that I had been thinking about for a while. I have an acting background. I have a theater background. I enjoy talking. I am an extrovert, and definitely am someone that enjoys being able to I'm not going to say hear myself speak, somebody, because it's not that, but it's that I felt that I had something to say. I felt that I had something to share, and I had been starting to listen to podcasts, because I really hadn't before 2015. I really hadn't started to listen to podcasts, even though they'd been around for quite a few years. And I started to binge listen to a lot of different podcasts, and I really liked what I was listening. And I kept saying to myself, I have a voice, I have something to say, and I know that I could share this too. But I also knew in the back of my mind that I have a lot on my plate.
Right.
So with everything that I have on my plate, I knew that doing this by myself was not an option. So as I was thinking about this, I was talking to some of my other friends that I've met over the years in blogging, and I said, here's some names, here's some people, here's some things, some people that I'm thinking about, and I reached out to a few people just to say, hey, what do you think? And they said, well, you should be talking to Don Jackson because he's thinking about starting a podcast too. So I reached out, and I knew of Don because Don writes over at a blog called Daddy Newbie. He lives over in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we had met at a Dad 2.0 summit. It's a conference that happens every year. It was in its 6th year this year. And it's an opportunity for dads that are in the social media space, that are out and speaking to others and sharing their journeys in many different ways, to meet, to learn, to share, and to be able to grow. And we met at one point, but we didn't really know each other. So I reached out to him and I talked to him and said, hey, I heard you're going to be starting one. And he said, yeah, I've got a couple in the can. I just haven't done it yet. I haven't put anything up online yet. And I said, well, I said, I've got a website already set. This is what I'm thinking about doing. This is the concept. And he said, well, I'll just pitch the canned ones that I've got, and why don't we work together? And the rest is history. So we've been working together since June of 2015. And the whole concept from the very beginning was, what can we do to help dads be better dads? So we put out 2 episodes a week. One episode is called The Dad Spotlight, which is a general episode that talks more about fatherhood and about the journey of being a father. And then we also have an episode that comes out later in the week called The Dad's Toolbox, which are much more down and dirty tips, resources, hints, things that you can do right away to be able to help you to be a better dad. And those tend to be a little bit shorter episodes, but they're great episodes because they're very tangible and they're very practical. So you can just take that episode, 20 minutes and walk out the door with some ideas of ways in which you can make some substantive changes to help you be that better dad. One of the things that we love about the Dad Spotlight episodes is that we always end our episodes with what we call our parenting paradigm questions, which are 5 questions which we ask every guest that delve deeper into them as a parent. And really it gets into it makes you see that not only the differences but the similarities in parenting and fatherhood, and it also lets them break down those barriers. So we've had some great guests on. We have some great guests that are coming on in the future, and even when we have well-known guests, what we try to do is get them to talk about things that they don't always talk about, because you can have a well-known person on, and if they're talking about the same thing that you've heard them talk about on 5 other podcasts, why would someone else come to listen to you? So what we're trying to do is get them to share some more of their lives and more of their journeys, kind of like what you're doing here.
Nice. Yeah. And having talked to you off the air about some of those guests you have coming up, I'm really happy for you. You got some big names coming up, so my listeners will definitely want to go check out, Dad Spotlight from going forward from here. So I'm wondering, I do cover the topic of parenting on Choice Conversations, but mine it's not necessarily specific to fathers. It's just parenting in general, equally applicable to mothers and fathers. What was the deciding factor to go down just honing in on the dads?
For me, it has always been that is what I know. I know the experience that I've had. And I started my blog, my Dad of Divas blog. I started that as a way to be able to talk about my own fatherhood journey, my own parenting journey. And I mean, there is some overlap. And what's really funny is the fact that on both my Dad Spotlight blog, as well as the Dad of Divas blog, as well as the Dad Spotlight podcast, what I tend to find is that about 60% of my listeners, as well as my readers, are women.
Wow.
So it's really strange because, the avatar that we have for the show is a man, but we still have a very large audience that are women that are listening in. So even though we're talking to men, the content that we've got on the show, the content that I'm putting out on the blog is definitely, it pertains to both genders. So it always started because of my own journey, but it has gone beyond that. Dad of Divas is a little more parenting based, but I definitely talk about the father's journey and talk from a father's point of view. And that is in every one of my posts, but the posts in general are non-specific in regards to male or female. So, if I'm talking about something that, let's say security or safety and security online, that's not a male or female thing. It's a parenting thing. I mean, how do we keep our kids safe? So we're going to talk about that in general, and I'll put that out there. But whereas on the Dad Spotlight show, our thought in the back of our mind is always we're talking to the dad that's out there. So if you're the guest on the show, we're going to talk to you about your experiences and about your fatherhood experience. But then on a toolbox, we're gonna be talking to the guest and having them, even if it's a female that's on the guest or a female guest, we're going to be having them share and say, what would you say to other fathers to help them be better dads, and have them share that from that perspective as well.
Nice. Yeah, and that's great that you are getting a lot of females as well, that even though you've chose to niche down a little bit and focus on dads, that hasn't just, chopped out half of your potential listeners, right? That's always the thing when you niche down. Niching down in general is a good thing, but you're like, well, if I niche down, there's the potential to cut off, a potential audience, and that you were able to niche down without impacting that at all. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely the case. It's definitely the case. And what we found, especially on the podcast, is that the more research that we did, and that's the problem with podcasting, is when you're starting, a lot of times you get into that situation where you are afraid to launch. And you have all these ideas and you research about, the best equipment and how do I start and what do I do? And all these questions. But, and if you look at most people out there, they just say, you've just got to launch, just record something and put it out there. It could be terrible, but you just put it out there. And we took a little bit of time to be able to try to figure out who our avatar was. We say avatar, but who the person that we're talking to is. Sure. And that's really important. And because when you're talking, especially on podcasting, as it's a very personal media. And, when I'm talking on my show, I have to picture that person on the other end of the headphones, and I'm talking to that one person versus hey guys, or hey you all, and it's a semantic shift. But it was definitely something that you have to work on and you have to practice, because it doesn't come naturally at first, but you have to work into it.
Right. Yeah. And you also have your partner in crime to sit there and talk to, which helps, and like me, I don't normally do solo casts where it's just me. I have some of them, but in general, I have a guest on or a co-host. And so that makes it a little easier, the back and forth. But yeah, I know what you mean. You really have to be thinking about, who it is you're talking to if you want to provide some good content for the people that that are listening in, right? So, and I guess with that in mind, when people tune in to Dad Spotlight, what kind of parenting advice are they getting? What would you consider your parenting philosophy to be?
My personal parenting philosophy is to be as engaged as you can be as present as you can be, and from the very beginning. And I don't, and some of that comes through, I think, on the show because it's partially my show, right? So Don and I are a bit different in regards to our parenting philosophy. We say we're both doctors because we both have our doctorates, but we're not using them on the show in that way. But that being said, it's a lot of fun to be able to have the interplay between us. I really like having a co-host on with me. He has 2 sons. I have 2 daughters. So we can talk about things in different ways, share different experiences. But we love having other people on the show too, because we say, hey, yeah, we've got our own experiences, but there are other people that are experts in other areas that we want to bring to be able to share their experiences too. Because the more that you can learn and grow from other people, the more experiences that you can hear, the more you can juxtapose that with what you are doing and then figure out for yourself what works best. Because even the guests that we have on the show, it doesn't mean that that's the perfect scenario. That doesn't mean that that's the one way that you have to do it. It just means it's one way. But if let's say I'm sharing on your show, or what my guests are sharing on our show hits a key, resonates, then hopefully we're helping people to be able to help them to make some changes in what they're doing, to be able to better impact the children that they do have, the children that they want to have, and help them to be able to be the best dads that they can be.
Yeah. I mean, podcasting is just such a rewarding thing because, on one hand, you're helping other people, right? You're providing value and helping them to better themselves. And that's a really good feeling to be able to help other people. But at the same time, you're learning yourself from your guests, from the process of just like talking through your ideas. A lot of times we have ideas in our heads, but they don't necessarily get fully fleshed out until we have to articulate them and explain it to somebody else, right? So the process of that, and, I've had so much growth through my podcast, and as it sounds like you have through yours as well. So I guess with that in mind, what would you say has changed since you started doing Dad Spotlight in your philosophy, in your parenting? What have you learned that's really made a big change for you?
Some of the things that are kind of are interesting because we've had some interesting guests on the show, especially in the toolbox, that have dealt with some issues that are definitely not comfortable issues to talk about. So we have a guest that comes on, and she's a recurring guest, but she's a sexual health expert. And we've talked to her about talking to your daughters about sex, talking to your sons about sex, talking about gender and dealing with gender differences and how do you talk about people that are if your kids are coming to you and saying that they're transgendered. We try to talk about some of these important topics, but tough topics too. And the conversations that we have with her have been amazing because she's very open. Very open and upfront. And sometimes we have to put the filter on her and say, okay, make sure you tone it down a little bit, because it is a G-rated show. But she is very upfront in saying that parents need to be starting to talk to their kids at a very young age about sex and being honest with their kids about sex, which, is not comfortable. It's not something that you want to talk about, but it makes sense. And the more that we talk to her about it, it's something that, I've tried to start having some conversations with my own kids about it. And it's not an easy conversation, especially because we started a little bit later than what she would have recommended. And now, especially for my older daughter, she's like, oh, don't talk to me about that, But that being said, but there's a lot of other things. I learn from every guest, just like you were saying. I learn from every guest that comes onto our show because every guest's background, every guest's journey is so different. So whether it's a toolbox where it's very tangible or the spotlights, I am gaining a ton. And I say that I gain probably just as much as what our listeners are gaining with every guest that we interview. And that's that's one of the other reasons that I love being a co-host of the show, is because of the opportunity to be able to learn and to grow, to try to help myself be a better dad. I know that I still have a ways to go. I know that I'm not an expert. I mean, I try to be the best dad that I can be, but I know that there are times where I lose my temper and I feel like a failure when it comes to being a great dad. But it's a journey, and you have to learn along the way about how to be that good dad, so that you are helping your children to be well adjusted and basically ready for adulthood, because that's what you only have a short period of time to prepare your kids to be ready for adulthood. And I see that every day that I see my oldest daughter, because it's still amazing to me. She's 12 and a half, and it seems like just yesterday that she was born. And I look ahead and I'm like, well, she's only got 6 years left in public school, and then she's going to be graduating from high school. I'm like, holy crud. So it's definitely eye-opening with every guest that comes on. And while some of the experiences are similar, so many of them are very different. And because of that, it is so rewarding, because every person is bringing something new to the table. And those new experiences are helping not only me and Don, but also everyone that's listening to be a better father in the end.
Right. Now, I'm curious how you've learned to handle conflict in your parenting, because that's one of the things that it can be the most challenging. I know when I talk to people, it's like, it's easy when things are going well, right? That's not the hard part. The hard part is when there's conflict, and the children are so excellent. They're the best people in the world at pushing our buttons, at triggering the issues we have left over from when we were kids, that have not been dealt with, right? They are uniquely positioned to trigger those more than anyone else out there. And it's like you said, you get angry, you have other emotions come up, strong emotional reactions that make it difficult for you then to parent in the way that you would like to parent, in a vacuum, right? When you step back from the situation and you're no longer emotionally charged. So how have you learned to handle conflict as a father?
I'm going to say I'm still a work in progress, because conflict is definitely something that's challenging, because I've got two daughters that are very, very different from one another. I've got one that has challenged us from the beginning in day one, and I've got one that has been a piece of cake, and she is empathetic to a T, and does everything that she can to help others, whereas the other is completely the opposite. And it's really, it can be very challenging when you have that difference, and you want one child to be a little more like the other, and that definitely never goes well. For me, though, I think that when conflicts do arise, one of the things that I try my best to do is be able to take a step back, stop, think before I respond. I don't always do it well, but I try. And if it doesn't go well, I try to have a conversation later with my child about what happened, so that we both can talk about it, because I think that's important. It's important to have good lines of communication. And you have to know your child well enough to know how they can how they will process that. And then you work from there. Because, I mean, kids can be forgiving. They can be very forgiving. And that's kind of a nice thing for parents. So you can screw up, and the next day your kid's still giving you hugs and being willing to forgive you for whatever it was. Now, if it continues and goes on and on and on and on, it's going to be long lasting, and it's going to leave a mark. So you have to be, I truly believe you have to be honest, you have to be open, and you need to be having those conversations with your kids about, oh, that didn't really go well. I didn't like how that happened. I didn't like what happened this morning. I wish that it had gone this way instead. And then have a conversation about that so that they feel that they have a voice. You still feel like you can have a voice, and you still are maintaining that sense of trust. You're opening up an area of open dialogue for further communication that needs to occur down the road, and that hopefully they're going to feel then more comfortable to come to you when other issues arise. That's what I'm hoping that I'm doing for my own daughters.
Yeah, I really like that, where you talk about going back after the fact and following up, when something doesn't go well, and just, talking about it and going back through. And you can do that even when something goes right too. Go back and revisit, boy, that, we really had a good time yesterday afternoon, and talk about, well, why is it? What do you think was different about yesterday than our normal day? Why was that such a special moment, and just having those kind of, like meta discussions, right, about your relationship is very valuable for you and especially for your child. So yeah, I really like that approach. That's definitely a good approach. So, and one I've used myself. Now, one of the things that I found interesting about being a parent is that not only, do I have this new role that I didn't have before, as now I'm a father. Before that I was a son, I was a husband, a friend, the various roles I have, and now I get this new role. But not only that, but as you work on being better in that role as a parent, it impacts your role, the roles you have in other areas of your life. Your role as a husband changes, your roles even as like just hanging out with the guys as a friend and stuff like that. And it really changes you when you pick up this role, unlike any other roles that you might add. I think becoming a father changed me much more so than becoming a husband did, for example. And, I'm just wondering if you experienced that, and if so, maybe if you could talk about that a little.
Definitely. And things do change. We waited quite a while before we had kids. And for us, we ended up waiting about 7 years before we had kids. So I felt that we got to know each other quite a bit, and we developed a relationship that was a solid relationship, which I think is a positive thing. I mean, I think having a solid relationship before you have kids is definitely important, because you need to make sure that you understand each other, you know each other before you jump right in and have a child. Now that isn't always possible, but I think that for us, that definitely was important. And for us, what I've come to find is that life doesn't slow down, and life definitely gets busy. It is important to try, as you are going through your life with your kids, to make sure that you still are maintaining that relationship with your spouse, because you can get lost along the way, and you can put so much time and effort into the lives of your kids that sometimes you forget about the individual that's helping you along the way. And you can't do that, or in the end, your relationship is going to suffer. And as I said earlier, you only have your kids for so many years, and then they're going to go off and be adults, or at least most likely they're going to leave your house and go and be adults. And if that happens, if they go off and be adults and your house is empty and you've not maintained that relationship, you've not fostered that relationship along the way, then you're going to find that you're going to have a lot of work to do once that time arises. Or you're going to be very different people. So you need to make sure that you keep knowing each other, that you keep supporting each other, and you keep doing things for each other along the way to not lose yourself. And some of that is personally, and making sure that you don't lose yourself personally along the way. And that could be still going out and doing something with the guys, or if you have a spouse, letting your spouse go out and doing something with their friends. But it's also being able to maintain your own sense of identity in the other ways that are important to you too. So whether that be through your interests, your hobbies, your other things, I think that's important too, is to try to maintain those things. Be able to show your kids that you can have separate identities and be able to, and still be present and active in their lives too. So I think all of those are things that I've learned along the way. And it's definitely still something that I'm learning as I go along. But those are things that just come as you go along, because you don't know that your relationships are going to change. You don't know that you're going to have to make adjustments. You definitely probably understand that there's going to have to be some adjustments that happen. But I hear young fathers, people that are going to be fathers, coming in and saying, well, I'm just going to keep doing everything that I'm doing. And I'm like, well, talk to me in a year and tell me if that's still the case. Because sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Sometimes you have to make adjustments. And you can't be the same person that you were before you had children. But that's okay, because you can be a different person, or a person that is doing some of the same things, but some different things too, because your priorities are going to be different and you're going to be focusing on some different things.
Right, right. Yeah, I will say that for me, when I became a father, it really was probably the single biggest turning moment in my life, as far as so I look back at who I was as a younger man to what I am today, and I'm really truly not the same person, even remotely close to the same person in almost every way. And some of the people that know me can attest to that, most notably my wife. My wife's like, I married one guy, and that's not the guy I'm currently married to. When I look at what was the one key turning point, it was definitely the birth of my daughter, and some of the things that jumped out to me when I think of what changed at that point, other than the obvious of now, you can't watch football all weekend because you're busy, changing diapers and whatnot, running errands and a million other things. But the things that changed is, first of all, the meaning in my life changed dramatically. I don't know that I really had a meaning. I certainly didn't have explicitly declared what the meaning of life was for me. And now all of a sudden there was tremendous meaning in my life. And with that came a look to the future, where I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the future and thinking about what was important to me as I went forward. And, now there was a lot of that, and bringing an awareness to myself that, like I mentioned before, how kids are so uniquely, quote unquote, talented at pushing our buttons, right? At finding the unprocessed damage, the baggage that we're carrying along from when we were children is pretty much what it boils down to. And saying that they push our buttons is probably not a fair way of putting it. It's more like we allow them to push our buttons. But I digress. That's a whole other podcast right there to talk about that. But this, now having this little person who could trigger in me these emotional responses that, were for the most part dormant, or at least more subdued, and we're now coming up more. And it brought this awareness to this, like, holy cow, what is this that's going on inside me whenever, we have a conflict, and then, I have an emotional response, and after the fact, I'm doing a postmortem on the situation, looking back and thinking, that didn't go like I wanted it to go. What went wrong, right? And it turned me towards self-awareness and starting to develop that. And then that opened up a whole can of worms for, my entire life. It was like, well, what about awareness? Like now when I'm in my relationship with my wife and with my parents and with my, my family and at work and all these things, and leading me towards a path of personal development and growth and healing. And, it really was this point where just, the ship completely turned, did a 180 and went in a whole other direction where it was going before that. And it was just, they talk about life-changing event, that's like the definition, the sample, the example that everybody puts up when you talk about a life-changing event is, the birth of a child as being probably the number one thing. And, even ahead of getting married. And it went beyond anything I could have ever imagined as far as like changing my life to be, way more than just the, like, what my schedule looked like during the day, way more than just like now I'm not watching nearly as much football as I used to watch before, to now the thoughts in my head are completely different. Now my values are different, or if, they, I don't know, they even had values before. Certainly, like I said, certainly not explicitly declared values, right? I had to search for those and decide on them consciously. What did I want my values to be? And what a great gift that is, that, that my daughter gave to me, that my wife gave to me, that I guess the life gave to me, to have that experience that opened up so many things. So, man, I'm sitting here, I'm going on with this soliloquy, and I'm wanting so badly to hear what your take is on what I just said. But at the same time, I'm looking at the clock and thinking, geez, we need to probably start closing up. So, I guess if you've got if you've got like a minute or two of feedback on that, and then we'll go ahead and close it up.
I have to agree with you. I think that it is one of the most life-changing events. I mean, yes, as a father, we don't have the child coming out of us. I mean, and we don't have that same bond that a mother has. But that being said, the bond that we do have is so important. I mean, if you look at any research, it shows the value and the importance of a father in a child's life. And I always keep that in mind, because I have always said to myself that no matter what, I mean, I may completely screw up. I may make some bad mistakes along the way, but I want to be present. I want to be a father that is at as many of events as I can go to. I want to be involved in the schools. I want to do what I can to be able to give back and to be able to show my kids that as well. And that's really, and I feel that that's really important. And I think that you have to look for yourself and see, what do you value most in your role as a dad? But in the end, you only have your kids for so many years. And because of that, those early years are critical, but all of the years that you've got with them are critical, because if you're not around, if you're putting all your effort into work, yeah, you might be paying your bills, but in the end, your kids aren't going to know you. And they just want you there. I mean, they could care less if they have all the brand new technology or all the brand new toys. I mean, and if they don't grow up with all that stuff, they're not going to know any different. But they will know if you're there and you're on the floor coloring with them, playing games, shooting basketball, kicking the soccer ball. They're going to remember those things. They're going to remember that you were there for them. And that's important. I mean, that is so important, because time is something that is something that you can't quantify, but it is something that is so valuable. So that's what I would leave with, is look at what you can do to be able to spend the most time that you can with your kids. Take the most out of every moment and take advantage of the time that you have with your kids when they're young.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So if my listeners would like to find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can definitely take a listen in on our podcast at dadspotlight.com. You can also come over to my blog over at dadofdivas. It's all one word, .com. So either of those places, and I'm on all the social media. We're either at Dad Spotlight or Dad of Divas. So you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. We're and all the big ones anyways. And you can definitely find us on all of those. So we'd love to have you come over, check out both of them, one of them, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think and let us know about your journey, because we definitely always love to hear about that as well.
Awesome. And as always, I will provide links to those in the show notes so that, if you're listening to this, just open the show notes and you're just a click away. So, all right, Chris, well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I totally appreciate it.
All right, take care. All right, gang. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Be sure to check out dadspotlight.com, Chris's podcast, also his blog, dadofdivas.com. Really good stuff. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media, tell your friends about it, that sort of thing. I really, really appreciate it. It really helps the show out. If you'd like to contribute to the show and get some excellent bonus content, patreon.com/choiceconversations is the best way to do that. There's links to all this stuff in the show notes, so check it out. All right, everybody, take care. Remember, make the choice to be great.